Greetings fellow Whovians and welcome to Timey Wimey Review. In celebration of the release of Season 9 of classic Doctor Who on Blu-ray in the UK this week, I thought I'd review the opening story to that season for the third Doctor, The Day of the Daleks, originally broadcast on BBC One on New Year's Day 1972. Just in case you don't know the plot, the third Doctor, Jo Grant and unit have been assigned to investigate a strange paranormal phenomenon taking place at Audley House, where Sir Reginald Styles is holding a peace conference that could prevent a third world war. The paranormal activity is not a ghost, but a military guerrilla from 200 years into the future, sent back in time to assassinate Sir Reginald Styles. For in the future, they believe this was the starting point of Earth being enslaved by the Daleks. What I liked most about this story was the time travel concept and the overall theme of time travel, which for a show like Doctor Who, which explores time and space, we get a lot of the space, but not really much about time or sort of like paradoxes or anything like that. I'm sure this concept of going back in time to fix something from the past so they can have a prosperous future is something that's not overly new, especially in the 70s. But I would like to believe that this was kind of an inspiration for James Cameron, that he was watching this story of Doctor Who for some inspiration that led him to the movie The Terminator. 51-year spoiler here, but I loved the revelation that these freedom fighters were the ones who caused this paradox and they're just stuck in this time loop. I also appreciate that although these guerrillas or freedom fighters are pretty much portrayed as the hero in this story, I've got to appreciate how brave it was to also mention them under the same breath as terrorists, especially around that time of the Cold War and this threat of a third world war that's sort of like a little bit of an inspiration leading into this story. But the fact that these are guerrillas, it's sort of like all depends on point of view. They're either military guerrillas or the terrorists, freedom fighters, all sort of being thrown together, with the Doctor saying, the fanatical thinking of going back in time. This story was the first to feature the alien creatures known as the Ogrons, and I really love the makeup and the costumes of these ape-like creatures. And it doesn't. You can see the similarities to Planet of the Apes, but I don't feel like it's ripping them off at the same time. I would love to see these aliens back in modern Doctor Who at some point in the future. Maybe be more like a warrior race like the Klingons in Star Trek, sort of like maybe evolve their species somewhat. Because in Frontier in Space, the Doctor kind of mentioned that they're sort of thugs for hire type of thing. I would like to think that the Ogrons were enslaved by the Daleks, and they just used them as their sort of go-to to sort things out. If the Daleks can't be bothered to go down to that particular planet, we'll send the Ogrons to sort it out. That's kind of like my little belief. I know that they've been featured in Big Finish audios before, but I would love to see him again back in modern Doctor Who. I also like that their opening dialogue. I love the voices of them, and it's an infamous scene now. You can easily find it on YouTube, where this Ogron was saying in this way, "We have found and destroyed the enemy." And when the controller asked, "Was there any complications?" the same actor basically thought, "I can't be bothered to do this slow motion," and just went, "No complications." It just made me laugh. Jon Pertwee is in full swing here as the third Doctor. He's still pretty much this incarnation of the Doctor is still pretty much the Doctor that we know and love, that we've seen from Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell, but really sort of throwing in the mixture of what was kind of popular at that time with kung fu and this sort of James Bond-esque style that Jon Pertwee brought into the role. I love the scene where he's basically single-handedly karate chopping the gorilla whilst drinking wine, and sort of, eating cheese at this house, this big house that he's babysitting. I felt that Doctor Who was certainly embracing the popular culture at the time of the spy sort of thrillers such as James Bond, with a mixture of the kung fu popular culture that was going on there, and mixed it with John Pertwee's own personal hobbies and interests, such as his love for fine food and drink, and his absolute passion for anything mechanical transportation. The quad bike scene in this story, where the Third Doctor and Joe make their escape, and there's this sort of like a sort of three-wheel tuck bike, was just conveniently parked outside for when they made their escape out of the Dalek prison, and they hopped on and they're sort of zooming around being chased by Ogrons. It just made me laugh that this wonderful bike that I know in the documentaries that Kate Manning was saying that her and John had a wonderful time bezzing around up and down on this tri bike, whatever you want to call it, but can only probably go about 10 miles an hour. You can clearly see on screen that the Ogrons are really pretending to sort of run, but very slowly, to try and capture the Doctor and Joe. One thing I found a little bit inconsistent with the Doctor's persona in the story was towards the end of this story, he was obviously talking about the assassination attempt of Styles and was asking him to do the assassination. The Doctor clearly refused, as he would, and saying that, you know, he doesn't it doesn't justify the means. He's all for the cause but doesn't justify the means. But earlier on the story, we see him clearly shoot an Ogron, you know, so the sort of moral balance was a little bit going back and forth. However, I would have to say that the absolute scene stealer was the guest star Aubrey Woods as the controller, who was enslaved by the Daleks, the sort of kind of like their own puppet, or as the Doctor calling it, the Quisling. He was fantastic. It's probably one of my most favourite guest appearances in Doctor Who. Certainly a very memorable performance by Aubrey Woods as the controller. You can just tell that he gave absolutely his all, 100%, 110% all the way. He was just sort of cold and calculating, menacing, especially when he has that chat with one of the other sort of subordinates in this stronghold, and he's sort of threatening him with his life, and not just his life, but his family, that controllers, subordinates, family and children, if they don't meet the production quota in the next cycle. It was, yeah, it's just a menacing sort of performance. But yeah, so memorable. And I loved his final line when he finally betrays the Daleks. Sorry for the spoilers, by the way, but when he says, "Who knows? I might have helped exterminate you." Just like I said, I can't praise him enough for this performance. And if you don't recognise him, you'll be kicking yourself. He's the Candyman from the classic movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the Gene Wilder version. As the title to this story suggests, we do have Daleks. And if I'm being brutally honest, they were the least interesting part in this story, sadly. This story was written by Lewis Marks, with Terry Nation getting a credit for creating the Daleks. Now, originally, there was going to be a planned story for the Daleks called The Daleks in London, but it got too similar, apparently, in folklore. It got too similar to the Daleks' invasion of Earth, so that got scrapped. So when they were looking for a big hook for the returning season for the Doctor, which would have been John Pertwee's third season as the Doctor, they decided to launch it with the return of the Daleks, after a 5-year hiatus. And so they quickly thrown in the Daleks into this story, and just sort of added that extra element into this story. Which, on one hand, I don't blame Barry Letts and Terence Dix, because obviously you want to launched this new series with something big, and it doesn't get any bigger than the Daleks. They haven't been seen, like I said, they haven't been seen for 5 years. The last appearance was their final end in The Evil of the Daleks, which you can check out my review for in the Timeline Review YouTube channel. And yeah, it just clearly showed that for after 5 years, that how the memory has forgotten how to really sort of write or do anything with the Daleks, because, well, for starters, there was only 3 props that was available. All the rest were just not fit for purpose from what I've read in the research for this review. And we had 2 gun metallic grey Daleks that we kind of got for the rest of classic Doctor Who. So that was their first appearance with the new eye stalk. And we have the gold Dalek as the leader. And the gold Dalek did look great in this story. But in terms of the dialogue, some of the lines that they were given was just a bit odd. Like, "Doctor, did you say doctor?" one of the Daleks said. But then again, we had a Dalek say, "Would you care for some tea?" So what do I know? But the voices was just a massive letdown. The original voices of the Daleks, I should say. And that's nothing against the performing artists who provided those voices. It was just the ring modulation was all wrong, and just the delivery of these lines were just off. Um, so, like, one of them, for example, was, "Whoever is operating the time machine is an enemy of the Daleks," and it was just so cringy. And my favorite part of these Dalek voices was at the end of the cliffhanger for part 3, where they were trying to get the Doctor to use some kind of mind probe on the Doctor, and at the end they were all saying, "You will be exterminated," in a very sing-songy way. They were basically going, "You will be exterminated," and then all of them joined in, "You will be exterminated. You will be exterminated. Come on, join in. You will be exterminated." So glad that they did a special edition for this story with Nicholas Briggs covering the Dalek voices. Yeah, it sounds a little bit more similar to sort of the modern era Doctor Who. But I do feel that Nicholas did bring his own little spin on it and made it a bit classic sounding at the same time. But it was, yeah, it's to the point now that we'll go into the special edition version. That I prefer watching that version more than the original transmitted version. Again, mainly for the Dalek voices, because yeah, Nicholas Brigg did a really good job making that better and made the dialogue a lot more sort of snappier, and in time with the rest of the other actors' dialogues. I do have some nostalgic memories. I do remember owning and still owning my VHS copy of Day of the Daleks, and this was when I was really starting to get into Doctor Who, and I wanted to collect all the Dalek stories first, and this was one of them. And I do do remember being a little bit underwhelmed by this story and sort of like a bit impatient of when the Daleks going to turn up. And when the Daleks did turn up, we got these very weird, odd sounding Daleks. I think what doesn't help for me in hindsight was I've already watched Revelation of the Daleks, Generation of the Daleks, and Remembrance of the Daleks. And obviously they are fantastic stories in their own right. And then going back to this one, it kind of just threw me off as a child. It is a story that I have appreciated a lot more when, as the older that I get. But just remembering being a child watching it for the first time, just being a little bit underwhelmed, mainly because of the Daleks and their voices. And it took me quite some time to actually finish that video. I always kind of stopped and started and never finished it. And then it took a good, probably a good year or so. I do remember visions of watching it all the way through, but being like distracted or doing something else and just looking up and seeing this sort of final conclusion to the story. I'm going to give Day of the Daleks a TARDIS rating of 7 out of 10. I'm going to have to say it's more of a soft 7 out of 10. It just hits that bar rather than a solid 7 out of 10. Um, as I said earlier, it's one of these stories that I've appreciated a lot more the older that I get. The time travel concept is probably the most interesting part for me in this story. John Pertwee was fantastic. Aubrey Wood was sublime. Absolutely phenomenal performance from him. I loved the Ogrons. It's a shame that Katie Manning as Joe Grant, and we also had the Unit family, Nicholas Courtney, and the rest of Unit. They didn't really have that much to do in this story. It's good that we did have a battle of Unit versus the Daleks and Ogrons. That was pretty cool. But in terms of their involvement, they have their more, I would say they have more of a spotlight in subsequent stories in this season. Slightly disappointing that the Daleks was basically thrown in at a last minute call to add them into the story, but I don't blame the production team for doing that. You know, you can certainly see why they did that, to give season 9 that big dramatic opening, to get as many eyes on their product as they possibly could. So I thought it was a pretty good call. To sum up, really, it's not the best Dalek story from the classic series of Doctor Who, but I would say it is a good third Doctor story, which you can watch in all its colourful glory right now on Blu-ray. As I said earlier, it's been released on Blu-ray as part of season 9 of classic Doctor Who earlier this week in the UK, but it's also available on DVD and streaming services BritBox and ITVX as a premium subscription in the UK, and both BritBox and ITVX are showing the special edition of this story on its streaming app. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts to Day of the Daleks. Is this one of your favourite third Doctor stories, or where would you rank this amongst the other stories of season 9 classic Doctor Who? Next time on Timey Wimey Review, I want to do something a little bit different on this channel, something new. I'm going to be talking about some of my unsung heroes affiliated with Doctor Who, starting off with the late great Bob Baker. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the cloister bell for more notifications, come say hello and follow me on Twitter at ReviewTimey, and please do check out my other videos and fantastic Doctor Who content on the Timey Wimey Review TikTok, and also right here on the Timey Wimey Review YouTube channel. And as the good doctor once said, you know, the one thing you can be certain of with politicians is that whatever their political ideas, they always keep a well-stocked larder.